Eternal Strands is a brand new action RPG that is absolutely packed with customizable gear, cool abilities, and some really fun combat mechanics. So after about 40 plus hours in the game, I'm going to pass on some of my must-know tips about the combat system, gear upgrades, weapons, tips for using magic, and a lot more. And special thanks to Yellow Brick Games for providing me with an early access code so I could dive in and get this video to you as soon as possible. So let's get into it. Now the first thing you need to know about Eternal Strands is that this game is incredibly flexible. And it does tend to start out a little bit slow while it teaches you some of the game's core mechanics. So even though you have the ability to explore the open world pretty much straight away, I would recommend playing through the main story at least for the first couple of hours up until you've unlocked the Lost City main quest. By this point, you should have access to the Loomgate, which essentially acts as the game's fast travel system and makes getting around much easier. Each different area will have at least one Loomgate that you should be able to fast travel to, and you'll need to discover them and activate it in order to use it as a fast travel point. Now as part of the main story early on, you'll also gain access to the Loomshard. This item allows you to fast travel back to your base from anywhere at any point in the game, even mid-battle. The game just kind of throws this in your tool belt and doesn't really tell you much about it, so be sure you don't miss it. Now another thing that you'll gain access to early as part of the main story is the Watcher's Wisp. The Watcher's Wisp will essentially guide you in the general direction of the objective for whatever mission you have active, which is really helpful because the game has no HUD and no quest markers. This works pretty similar to the winds in Ghost of Tsushima and your wand in Hogwarts Legacy. By activating the Watcher's Wisp, you'll send out a burst of magic that'll show you the path, but to start, it has a pretty lengthy cooldown. I would recommend completing Lane's companion quest, A Study in the Light, really early on. Once you've completed this quest, the cooldown time for the Wisp will be significantly reduced and you'll be able to use it a lot more frequently. Now, once you're out in the open world, you're gonna need to know how to fight, so let me run through some of the game's core combat mechanics and share some useful tips for getting the most out of the combat system. The main weapon of the game is gonna be your sword and your shield, and you've got your basic light attack, but by pressing and holding the attack button, you can also do a bit of a heavy attack. Now if you're running towards an enemy, you can also press the attack button and you'll do more of a lunging strike, which will knock the enemy back and will deal some additional damage. And unique to the sword and shield is that you also have the ability to parry. A successful parry will not only block the enemy's attack, but the hit immediately after the parry will also deal a significant amount of damage. For some enemies, you can also stun them following a successful parry, giving you a chance to charge in and deal an even greater amount of damage. This is super useful, especially for those enemies that have shields, because the stun will basically leave them defenseless for a few seconds. But what's even better is that the parry has the ability to launch projectiles at the enemy. This works for arrows and is one of the best ways I've found to take out the archers in the game. And this also works for magic projectiles as well as other elemental projectiles. Now locking onto an enemy will also help the parry, especially for sending a projectile back the way it came, but other than that, I've found locking on in combat, especially when there are multiple enemies around, it gets a little weird and the camera angles can make it kind of hard to fight, so I wouldn't necessarily make it a habit to frequently lock on.
Hold on.
Now for the other weapon types in the game, you'll also have a bow for taking out enemies at a distance, and a two-hander for more of your strength-based power weapon. And learning how to switch back and forth quickly between the different weapon types is also a really useful skill. For example, parrying an enemy with your shield and then quickly switching to the two-hander once they're stunned can be an easy way to take out most enemies. Now in addition to the standard weapons, each weapon type will also have magic variations. For each weapon type, you'll have fire, ice, and kinetic variations that include their own special skill. Each of these skills and elements can really add a lot of utility and fun to a fight, especially in the later part of the game as elemental enemies become a lot more common. Now in order to gain access to the different variations, as well as the different variations and pieces of your armor, you'll have to find the schematics or blueprints that are scattered throughout the world. They're pretty subtle, but if you look really closely at the map, you'll find these little hammer icons. These give you the location for the blueprints for the weapons and different armor pieces. Once you've picked up that particular piece, the area will have a green checkmark on the map, and you can take the schematics back to Sora and have her craft the piece. And speaking of magic, each different section of the map will give you a chance to learn a new magical ability by harvesting strands from the great foe in that area. I've found these fights to be some of the most fun and interesting in the game, so you'll definitely not want to overlook them. The purpose of these fights isn't necessarily to defeat the enemy, so don't really pay too much attention to their health bar. Instead, you're trying to uncover the foe's locus of power, which you'll find by typically attacking some of their weak points. And these aren't always the most obvious, so sometimes it does take a little bit of experimentation. You can also check out the Great Foes section of the Codex, which will usually give you some clues. But once you see the yellow symbol on the screen, you'll know that the locus is exposed and you can move in to harvest the strand. Now sometimes it is a little bit tricky to harvest the strand, but I found that it's useful to save up and have as much stamina as possible. Once you've collected the strand, you can turn it back into down to learn that ability. Now each of the abilities can be upgraded to level 3, which you can do by collecting additional strands from that same great foe. But I have found that each time that you face them, they get a little bit harder, so that's something you'll definitely want to be aware of. And the great foes will rotate from area to area, so if you're looking to upgrade a magic skill or harvest a new one, you definitely want to be sure to check the attunement to see which foe is in that area. Now in terms of upgrading and crafting, there is a lot of flexibility in Eternal Strands. Each different weapon and armor piece will require a certain type and amount of material that you can collect out in the world. There are 4 different types of materials that you'll need to collect in order to craft new gear: tanned, forged, carved, and woven. And not only do these different upgrade materials give you different stats, but they'll ultimately determine the color of the item, and there are a lot of different combinations that you can come up with. Now it is a little bit too bad that there isn't a transmog system or the ability to customize the colors independent of the materials, but maybe that's something we'll see in a future update. And I wouldn't necessarily worry about using up all your best items early, especially if you haven't yet used an item or an armor piece and you just want to craft it so you can test it out. You can always head back to Sora at any point and have her reforge an item, which basically gives you the chance to respec it. And you'll want to be on the lookout for different armor pieces that give you certain bonuses, like max magic, max health, or max stamina. Now in terms of your inventory, you can also turn your resources into Casman in exchange for camp supplies. These are basically generic resources that can be used to upgrade the different stations in your base, and they can help give you further upgrades. The first stations I upgraded were Sola's Forge, so I could upgrade my weapons to higher levels, and Casman's Caravan, so I could carry even more items in my inventory. Upgrading Lane's Archive will give you the ability to carry additional vitality potions, as well as the option to carry cold and heat resistant potions, which can be equipped to your toolbar. I found these useful towards the end of the game, but really didn't use these all that much early on. And Dom's Antelier will allow you to upgrade your magic mantle powers up to level 3. And since any resource can be salvaged and turned into camp supplies, definitely don't turn your rarest items in here. Instead, use the lower level common ones that you can collect a lot of when you're just out exploring in the world. And I found that I was able to collect enough resources to upgrade my stations pretty regularly just by exploring and going through the normal game progression, so there's really no need to farm. Now in terms of stamina, there's no way to level up your character and naturally increase the amount of stamina you have. But by decreasing the weight of your armor, you'll be able to decrease the amount of stamina you're using, letting you get more out of that stamina bar. It'll also increase how fast you're able to run, so if you find yourself continually running out of stamina and running really slow, be sure to keep an eye on your armor weight. Now when you die, you'll get transported back to your base, but you'll only be able to take a handful of resources you've collected with you.
Hold on, hold on.
So if you've been out in the world for a while and collected a lot of resources, this could be pretty damaging. So instead, this is a great place to use your Loomshard to transport back to your base. Once you're out of vitality potions and your health is starting to get low, and you feel like you might be close to meeting your end, you can use the Loomshard to transport yourself back to your base. That way, the items you've collected will automatically be added into your inventory and you won't lose a thing. This is another reason why it might be a good idea to upgrade Casman's Cavern Station, since higher levels not only increase your overall amount of inventory, but also the number of resources you're able to take with you when you die. But another benefit to just using your Loomshard is that your vitality potions will automatically recharge before heading out into the world. Now the exception to this is if you're on hard difficulty, where not only will your vitality potions not recharge, but any potions you've already picked up on that part of the map also won't respawn. Now the good news is, from what I've seen, hard difficulty doesn't actually increase the health of the enemies or how much damage they deal. It only seems to affect Bryn's health and how much health you get back from vitality potions. And speaking of potions, when you're out in the world, if you are low on vitality, be on the lookout for these sacks with these little heart icons. These sacks will always provide you with vitality potions. The exception, once again, is if you're on hard difficulty. If you're on hard difficulty and you die, any vitality potions you've previously collected out in the world before you died won't respawn. Now once you're out in the open world, you really do want to get familiar with using your attunement, which is basically your summary of that area. By collecting pages scattered around that part of the map, you'll be able to get more information for that summary page. This includes how many Loomgates you should be on the lookout for and what great foes are in that area, but what I found most useful is that it also shows which resources you can find in that part of the map. So if you're looking to farm for a specific resource, you know at least generally where you can go before venturing out. Alright, and those are all of my essential tips for getting started in Eternal Strands. If you found these helpful or learned something new, leaving a like on this video would be much appreciated. And if you've got a tip or a trick that helped you get started, be sure to leave it for me in the comments below. As always, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.